America's crime crisis.
All this week on the Fox News Rundown, we'll take a look at crime in America, examining the impacts it's having on daily life, the most effective ways to keep communities safe, and what's behind some of the trends, like what started in Milwaukee with the Kia Boys and spread across the nation, leading to soaring rates of stolen vehicles, especially Kias and Hyundais.
How do you actually steal a Kia? Is it an easy process?
Hell yeah.
Could you show us how it looks to steal a car?
I can show you inside your car.
As you can hear in that Tommy G TikTok video, self-proclaimed thieves only too happy to pass along their methods. A TikTok spokesperson says it's not a TikTok trend, that the platform doesn't allow content promoting theft, and that it's removed if found. The thieves have been so successful largely due to anti-theft technology those car companies did not include in their vehicles for about a decade. A security loophole that led to a software fix and, more recently, a settlement in a class action lawsuit. Retailers have been dealing with their own spate of crime, losing about $100 billion from it last year. Flash mobs and smash and grabs also making it hard to stay in business.
You've seen the videos and impact on social media. We've done studies looking at this, finding that not only is this increasing, but the groups that are engaging in this are becoming more violent and more brazen in their tactics.
Christian Beckner, the National Retail Federation's VP of Technology and Cybersecurity, says sharing information between law enforcement agencies helps, including between states, to connect crimes.
So you can build cases against them that this isn't isolated shoplifting. This is complex organized retail crime.
Punishment, or at least the prospect of it, doesn't appear to be deterring juvenile offenders. Sergeant Darren Moss with the Pierce County Sheriff's Office in Washington State tells Fox 13 in Seattle.
15, 16, 17 years old, we're seeing shootings and armed robberies, and they're in stolen cars 90% of the times in those incidents. When they get caught, they're charged as adults, and they go to big boy jail, and they go to prison. And that's not going to help these kids either.
So is this trend here to stay, or is there a way for law enforcement and society to get ahead of it?
There's always been criminality, and there's always been young persons who engage in acts of crime.
Former FBI Special Agent John Iannarelli, better known now as consultant and author, FBI John.
But social media has really changed the dynamics. Now you can round up a large group of interested parties who previously would have never been in contact with one another, and that's leading to a lot of what we're seeing in these various crimes.
And obviously, there's a wide range of crimes that we're talking about. They're not always deadly, but they can be. But even something like the flash mobs, the retail theft, it's scary, for the general public. You don't know when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen. Is the fear factor part of what's driving it as well? Is that what they're after?
I think there's some element of creating fear and intimidation and being able to take control of what otherwise is a normal setting. But it also can be deadly. Think of people that can be injured in the stampede, people fleeing the scene of a crime, and we've had vehicle accidents, etc., that persons have been killed. So just because they're stealing items doesn't mean it can't be tragic consequences.
What has law enforcement's response to this been so far? Are there new methods being used to counter this trend?
So law enforcement is trying to stay on top of this, but you have to bear in mind there's a lot of other issues that law enforcement is dealing with as well. There's a certain amount of social media monitoring to see if any of these things are being planned and upping resources to counter it. But again, when you have large groups spring up to commit acts like this, you're limited as to what can be done in the moment. Sometimes it's about the investigation afterwards to try to arrest people and bring them to justice.
Is it tipping more toward prevention of these, or is it really still focused on the investigations, post-crime? Do you see that balance shifting?
The balance is shifting slightly. But part of the problem is until something actually occurs, generally there's no crime. If you have a person who wants to incite the commission of a crime, you may be able to target that individual, but everybody else hasn't committed any sort of offense until the act occurs. So law enforcement essentially is hamstrung. They can look at what's happening, be prepared to intervene, but the act is still going to happen. People are still going to be scared, and there's going to be victims.
We've seen this recent pivot, fairly recent anyway, where some retailers are, taking more of matters into their own hands, locking up more of their products, et cetera. Not only the stores losing money, but maybe, as you say, more activity shifting online, then the brick and mortar, can't stay in business. Is it a societal change that we need then? What are we talking about to really make progress on this aspect of crime?
We have definitely seen a societal shift in the last few years where policing is not considered as important. We've heard the cries for defunding the police, etc. And crime is on the rise because law enforcement can't always intervene based on what politician decisions are. The answer here is really quite simple. We need to go back to the basics. We're a country of rules and law and order, and that needs to be embraced. It should not be the merchant's job to protect themselves alone. It should be societies cooperating and relying on government in the form of law enforcement and those who lead us to support the actions of arresting criminals and holding them accountable.
Do you think that we're putting too much emphasis or too much blame on younger generations, or is it a case of, that's what the statistics bear out so far with these sort of social media driven crime trends?
Statistics show what they show. And the reality is you're not getting middle-aged people rushing in the stores and grabbing items. You're also looking at the generation that is predominantly on social media. But I will tell you, it is going to change as this generation grows up with social media. Someday there'll be older persons still using social media while a new cadre of younger persons will come on board. So crime will shift. More will happen via social media and online as well. Law enforcement has to respond to that and be prepared, whether it's being proactive in predicting or responding to when the event occurs. But let's not lose sight of the fact the vast majority of young people are good people. You're talking about a small group in the entire percentage.
What about more steps in school? I know that at some schools, particularly middle and high schools, maybe some elementary schools as well, they do make more of an emphasis now on, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z when you're on social media, that can actually be considered a crime, depending on what you're even sending to a friend. If you're, both underage, for instance, does there need to be more of that? Do you think more law enforcement outreach in schools can help?
There definitely needs to be more education about consequences. I have frequently gone out into communities and talked about some of the problems online, whether it be bullying or sex trafficking and things of that nature. Many persons growing up with social media don't know what the guardrails are and the boundaries of how they can get themselves in trouble by what they say, pictures they send. Not only law enforcement, education, but at the end of the day, it's about parents too, that they need to become aware of what's going on. Parents need to know what their kids are doing online as well.
An optimistic perspective. FBI John, former FBI Special Agent John Iannarelli, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks for having me.
There's a name for this, the kind of crime the criminal wants people to know about, and it's been around a lot longer than social media. Performance crime.
Performance crime is basically crimes created and distributed with an audience in mind.
Raymond Surrett is a professor of criminal justice at the University of Central Florida.
Oftentimes, people not even aware that anything besides being victimized is going on. And there's been a recent example in the past few years has been something called happy slapping, where somebody goes along the street and walks up to a complete stranger and hits them. And, the stranger is caught totally unaware and, without any prior knowledge that they're about to be assaulted. Sort of a unique additional step to record your crime and then post it for other people to sort of view and comment on and share. It's been around for a long time, but it seems to be more dominated recently by teenagers. And I've sort of anecdotally run across evidence that there's not a lot of consideration of what the consequences of posting a crime are going to be. They seem to have psychologically the mindset that I'm going to post this for a limited audience of my friends or my classmates or other people in my juvenile gang or something like that, and not really being aware that these performance crimes provide all the evidence that law enforcement needs to convict people.
Do you think that especially young people taking part in something like the Kia Challenge would be criminals anyway if there wasn't a viral or social element to it?
Yeah, the Kia Challenge is interesting because teenagers that are going on and just getting the instructions to get, I believe they simply need a USB cable, if I remember that correctly.
Mm-hmm, correct.
And they use that to steal a Kia. Well, if they don't record it and distribute that, then again, that's simply using the media for crime instructions, and it's a straightforward copycat crime. Some subset of that group, however, will, I've learned, record the whole event and then post that in some sort of social media. They're not worried about the consequences of car theft. They're looking for some sort of validation and attention. But you're dealing with, from 12 to 20. It's a tough age range in terms of influencing people's behaviors.
I guess collectively, whatever society can do to sort of take the oxygen away from these things might be helpful, just from the standpoint of there may not be so much of a problem if there weren't an audience for these things.
Yeah, what the media can do, in a nutshell, you don't want to help with the distribution and replaying the videos and the performances, but you do want to emphasize and cover the negative consequences, injuries, arrests, and so on. And that balancing between the two, I would advocate as probably the most effective way of responding to these sorts of things.
Ray Surrett, professor of criminal justice at the University of Central Florida, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Hope it was helpful.